Hello, everyone. This is FPL Under the Radar. This is your host FPL Kante. We're just doing a quick data review this week for Game Week 3. We'll make it short. We'll try to keep it short. And this is something that we'll try to do going forward as well. For all the game weeks, just have a separate review of the data from the previous game week. So with that being said, let's get into the data from Game Week 3 first. So first of all, we are looking at some of the team data from Game Week 3, expected goals scored and expected goals conceded. Um, and as we saw, said before the game week as well, there were a lot of targetable games essentially, right? City playing Sheffield, Arsenal playing Fulham, Chelsea against Luton, Tottenham against Bournemouth, Manu against Forest, and Villa against Everton, right? So all of those were good fixtures, and they turned out to be very good fixtures for those teams, right? So they posted high XG numbers, and they didn't concede that many chances either. One game that was kind of probably a little surprising was the West Ham versus Brighton game. And I mean, again, Brighton has been defensively a little susceptible anyways, but West Ham on the counter kind of completely broke them. And I mean, in general, also they look really, really good. Moyes essentially outplayed De Zerbi in this game. Brighton didn't have any like regularly the influence that they have on other opponents. They just didn't have that in this game particularly. But yeah, I mean that's basically the was the highlight of the week. And the other game that we probably should talk about is the Newcastle versus Liverpool. Of course, Liverpool did Van Dijk did get an early red card. That did impact the game, of course, but Newcastle again created a whole lot of chances. Liverpool did fight back pretty well, though, after the red card, and they eventually won the game as well. But from a chance conceding standpoint, they that one goal that, of course, they considered was pretty bad mistake from Trent. But even other than that, I think Newcastle could have scored a couple more goals in that game. Liverpool, of course, scored from two low XG chances. Both of those came from Darwin Nunez late in the game. But yeah, that was basically the highlight of the game week. So next we'll just take a quick look at the team data from game week 1 to game week 3. And again, we'll keep doing this. So this data will be getting accumulated over time as we have data from more game weeks. And as you can see, there is clearly a pattern starting to that we are starting to see. I'll talk about the bottom left quadrant first. Bournemouth, Luton, Sheffield, and Fulham in there. And Burnley are probably not too far either. There are just essentially targetable teams, right? And we spoke about it before the season as well. There are just too many weak or weak-ish teams this time around that you can target from an FPL perspective. And it's already kind of evident, right? So all these teams who got promoted over the last couple of years, they're all very, very, very susceptible, just not as strong as all the other teams in the league. Forest also are actually not too far off from here. And also remember that Burnley and Luton have already played 2 games each. So Luton's defensive data would even look even worse if it could, similar to probably what Fulham says essentially. But yeah, these are the 5 or 6 teams that we can target pretty much every game week, right? Forest, Bournemouth, Luton, Sheffield, Fulham, Burnley, and Everton also to some extent. I mean, Everton's data doesn't look as bad because they have created a lot of chances. They haven't scored any goals yet. So 3 matches, 0 goals. But in general, again, from a defensive perspective, they have also looked pretty poor. Uh, Elsewhere, I think Man City are still posting elite numbers from an attacking perspective and from a defensive perspective. Brighton, we kind of expected them to be like this, and they are showing that they are a very good attacking team. 2 teams that have started the season very, very strongly. Uh, we expect them to be mid-table teams, but they have started the season very strongly, Aston Villa and Brentford. And I think that will continue, and especially Aston Villa, the team that they have formed under Unai Emery. they just look like a very, very good, well drilled side, right? So, especially from an attacking perspective, I think they have improved a lot. They will score a lot of goals this season. Watkins kind of unlucky to some extent that he hasn't gotten any goals yet this season. Diaby looked very well, very, very good. We'll talk about the player data in a minute. But yeah, in general, those two teams have looked very good. Chelsea are starting to show signs under Pochettino that they can be a good side. Their next few fixtures are also very good. There is a reason that we are targeting Chelsea players for the next few game weeks. Man United, I think they're in a little bit of a pickle with they lost Shaw with an injury and potentially Varane out also for a few weeks with an injury as well. I think that they could struggle a little bit, especially game week 4 against Arsenal is going to be a tough fight for them, but we'll see. And few other teams I would mention is definitely Newcastle and Arsenal. Arsenal necessarily haven't like started the season that well, not with the same kind of dominance that they showed last season. But again, their data is still pretty good. They're structurally kind of starting to figure out what their best 11 is. I think Arteta needs to figure out what his best 11 is. Jesus being back will be a big, big bonus for a lot of the FPL assets from Arsenal and for Jesus himself and for Arsenal in general. So I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on as well. Uh, so yeah, and Newcastle again have looked very good in the first 3 game weeks from an attacking perspective, especially. Their good fixture run is coming soon too, so keep an eye on that. I think a lot of us will be willing to buy Newcastle attackers and defenders pretty soon, especially game week 5 onwards. Okay, so that being said, let's look at some of the player performances. So the standout performer this game week out of all the defenders were Matty Cash. He was essential playing the right wing position for Aston Villa. Scored 2 goals. Big haul, right? 17-point haul. And his underlying is there too, right? It's not just that he, out of nothing, he scored the goals. His underlying is there. He has the highest XGI of all the defenders so far. And he's showing on his returns as well. Couple of other players that should mention, especially based on Game Week 3 performance, is the Destiny Udogie from Spurs and Mal Gusto from Chelsea. Both of them scored big again. Gusto scored 14 and Udogie got 12 FPL points. Their underlying was not necessarily as strong, but again, I mean, especially Udogie has looked good over the first 3 game weeks. He looks pretty nailed as well in that left back position. Gusto probably not, of course, as nailed. As soon as James Reese comes back, he will be sidelined. But his underlying was not that great. That first assist for Sterling was all Sterling, nothing to do with Gusto. But the second one was a good one. Again, for a short term, if you have him there, I think both of them are great holds. Udogie for even for the long term is a great buy. Chilwell has been a little disappointing from a return standpoint. He has looked good again this game week. Also, he looked very good. He had that one chance to shoot that he didn't take the shot. I don't know what he was thinking, what he was trying to do, but he could have gone big in this game week as well. So that was unfortunate for owners. But again, when we look at the next set of data, we'll see that he is up there basically in one of the best defenders in FPL right now. So let's look at the attacker data again from game week 3 only. As we see here, Bruno Fernandes, once again, he posted very good numbers. Of course, he had the penalty, so his expected FPL points are up there, but he could have gotten more, right? So he got 1 goal and 1 assist, but it could have been even a bigger haul for him. Saka took the penalty this time around. Odegaard did not. So he is again, I mean, if anyone was worried that Saka wouldn't be as good of an APL asset yet, I think Odegaard taking the penalty was the anomaly. Saka looks like the more regular taker, if anything. Arteta was surprised too, right, when Ode took it. So I would think that Saka would keep taking the penalties. So yeah, both of them are great assets. Bowen, the next game is against Luton, probably the most targetable team right now in the whole league. This could be a fascinating fixture for Bowen and West Ham FPL assets. But elsewhere, I think we should definitely talk about Madison and Sterling. Kind of at the opposite spectrum, both of their expected FPL points are similar, but Sterling kind of absolutely broke it, right? That especially that first goal was so good, reminded us of the old Sterling that we used to see in Man City, dribbling past 5, 6 players and scoring that goal. But yeah, he did overperform, but at the same time, his underlying wasn't bad either, right? He was very involved all through the game. And those two are the guys, probably Madison and Sterling, that people are wanting to get in for the next few game weeks as well. So that's that. Let's move to the overall data a little bit. So again, this will be accumulated over game weeks. So we are looking at data between game week 1 and game week 3. Um, Again, from a defensive standpoint, as I said before, Cash has the highest XGI of all the defenders, and he has the returns as well. He looks very involved. He is essentially playing as the right winger, with Diaby kind of narrowed down, with Watkins in the middle. So he could be a great asset, especially when their fixture turns at around game week 8, 9 time frame. I think a lot of us will be tripled up with Aston Villa assets, and Cash will definitely be one of them if he has nailed his place. Chilwell, as I was saying before, he has underperformed. Owners overall a little unlucky what we have gotten so far from him over between game week 1 and game week 3. But there's plenty more, right? Again, he is another player who is essentially playing as an attacker. If you look at the heat maps and everything, he's basically the left side attacker for Chelsea. So very high upside, probably the highest upside out of all the defenders in FPL right now. A few other people, defenders that did have done okay or good over the first 3 game weeks are Anderson from Crystal Palace, Estopinian, of course, very highly owned. We don't even have to talk about him. Romero, the Spurs defense have looked good. Vicario as a goalkeeper has looked very good. So that's something to keep an eye on. I mean, we were all thinking that Spurs may not be defensively as strong, but they are kind of showing, especially with a good goalkeeper, you kind of sometimes do overperform your defensive numbers a little bit. So yeah, I think Spurs defenders could be very interesting in the coming days. Man City defenders, as you see, so few of them are in there, Walker and AK. The trouble with Walker is we just don't know. As soon as Champions League starts, Pep may not see him as a starter in the league as much, at least with his age especially. But he has been kind of attacking as well, right? He has been playing the right wing back role, bombing forward, unlike the Walker that we have seen over the last 2, 3 seasons in Man City. He was like that in when he was back in Spurs, but in City he was playing a different role. So yeah, that could be interesting as well. But yeah, generally speaking, I think one defender, we absolute bottom left of this plot is Trippier. And as I said before, game week 5 onwards, we'll all want to have a Newcastle defender at least, probably more. And Trippier will be again in the mix. Of course, the downside or the con is that he's highly priced, 6.5 million, right? So other than Trent, no one else is even close in price bracket. So that could be a challenge. But if you have money, and money is barely a problem this season with all the good mids, nicely priced midfielders and so on, I think TPR is going to be very highly owned, and he has the potential to recreate his last season's performance essentially. So let's look at the midfielder and forwards data for game week 1 to 3 as well. This is again the accumulated data for the first 3 game weeks. Again, what stands out is Brian Mbeumo didn't do much in the third game, of course, but his underlying data, and given that he is on penalties, looks still a very strong candidate to have a place in our APL midfield. And their fixtures, again, I think game week 5 is against Newcastle away, but other than either side of it, their fixtures look pretty good for a very long term. So I mean, owners I'm envious if anyone doesn't have him, and I'm thinking very much that I would bring him in for this game week for one of my midfielders, potentially Mitoma. He is high on that list for me for sure. Again, because if anytime Brentford score, he will very likely be involved, and also he's on penalty, so hard to ignore that. Bruno Fernandes has underperformed significantly, right? So anyone who has owned Bruno for the first 3 game weeks, that kind of feel a little hard done. But I think with Haaland in, hopefully in game week 4, 5 time frame, even with Marshall in, I think Manu just looked like a better side, right? Rashford looked better, Bruno looked better. They just perform better as a team when they have a better number 9, essentially, right? So that's something to keep an eye on. I think Bruno is a hold for me right now, right? I was not thinking of selling him, and after the game week 3 performance, of course, it was in Forest, but again, I think in general, in the long term, he is a fine hold. Haaland and Salah, nothing to talk about them, but Salah has underperformed a little bit. Um, he does look a little peripheral, to be honest, with whoever playing the number 9 is at the center. Salah is looking more like the assister than the goal getter that he was in the past years. I mean, he would still have a great season. He would still end up with a great season. But I think there is enough doubt, especially his price being 12.5 million, that a lot of owners are looking forward to sell him for other better priced midfielders, essentially. Saka, we spoke about him, great asset. Madison, great asset. Sterling, again, overperforming a little bit, but in general, given their fixtures, great asset. Diaby, as I said, he's essentially playing as the second forward alongside Watkins. Great asset. Wisa, of course, he's a forward, but again, unless Brentford buy a new forward, he looks pretty nailed. He looks good. He looks to be in the plan for Thomas Frank. So there is no reason for him to drop out anytime soon. Great asset again. Few players probably should be mentioned are, of course, uh, Mitoma and the Brighton boys a little bit. March again is the highest point getter right now in the FPL out of all the midfielders and all the attackers, essentially. His underlying is not that strong, but again, we have seen him this season to be more central in or around that box, trying to score more goals. Seems like that De Zerbi has kind of ordered him to be in around the box to score more goals. Mitoma has looked a little peripheral, to be honest. He scored that wonder goal, of course, but other than that, hasn't necessarily looked like a great FPL asset. He always looks like a great player on the pitch, of course, but just given their fixtures in the next few weeks, and given that how many good teams and good players have like really good run of fixtures, I think a lot of us will look forward to sell our Brighton midfielders, even though they are really good as a team, right? So I wouldn't mind selling someone like a Mitoma in the coming game weeks. Elsewhere, I think Eze is one of the players who has underperformed significantly. So his expected points should have been 18-ish, but he has only like 7 points. So if any Eze owner, I think he has nice fixtures again, game week 4 onwards. Unless you have to absolutely sell him for a better asset that you think are better than him for the next few game weeks, I think he's a fine hold. He is just his returns are coming soon. Watkins is another. He doesn't have any goal yet, but 3 assists in 3 games. So he's ticking along nicely for owners. And again, there is a lot of temptation to move to Jackson or even like Alvarez for some people. But I think Watkins is a nice, fine hold, right? So as long as you keep faith on him, he will trickle along very nicely. So I don't mind holding him at all. The other player that on the left side of the plot is Rashford. Expected points 12, and then he has scored about 12 FPL points as well. Uh, I mean, of course, as I said before, as soon as they get a proper number 9 in Holland, Rashford will become a great FPL asset. I can absolutely foresee him having another 200-point season this year as well. So at least not a sell for me right now. I know a lot of people were frustrated with him in the first 2 game weeks, but again, he did get 2 assists in this third game against Forest. Again, I think for me, he's a hold for now, given Manu's fixture past game week 4. Isak is an interesting one, and again, he didn't get any returns in game week 3 against Liverpool, but again looked very central. Started the game, but he's always going to be a little worry for me with UCL coming and so on. Wilson can always start a game, very able to lead that forward line for Newcastle. So yeah, that's the only concern. I know a lot of people are also interested in Awani. He has 3 goals in 3 games, but those 3 goals came from 3 shots only. The 3 shots that we took all were goals. So I wouldn't necessarily go there. I think there are a lot of better forwards to go there. Watkins, Nicholas Jackson, Alvarez, and so on, that, or even Wisa, that you can go for over Awani. So I wouldn't be looking at him right now. But yeah, that's it from for this game week. Again, our target would be to do a game week review, basically after every game week, and then do a preview for the upcoming game week, and also do our team selection. We'll try to divide it in 3 different videos from now on moving forward. But yeah, let us know what your, if you have any suggestions, if anything that you would like to see in future videos. But apart from that, thank you. We'll meet you guys soon for our game week 4 preview. Have a good rest of the day. Thank you, everyone.